Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that all of you could join us today for IPDAE Webinar Wednesday. Our topic today is enhancing learning outcomes with IPDAE's new math matrix, an instructional suite. Last week we talked about RLA, and this week we're going to be focusing on math. Our facilitator today is Mr. Ronald Cruz, no stranger to all of us. And we're happy that we have his attention today to walk us through this math matrix. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, June. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this afternoon. Appreciate your time. I know your time is very precious. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. But right before, I want to just remind everybody that if you have any question, please type your questions into the Q&A tab. Your microphones will be muted throughout the presentation, and you will only be in listen mode. The presentation is being recorded as we speak, so it'll be archived and available to download or view at the IPDAE website within 48 hours. We're going to cover 4 major things today as we cover the instructional suite for mathematics. First, I'm just going to go over the changes in the curriculum frameworks and what prompted these changes, and how are these changes being reflected now to the revised instructional suite for mathematics. We're also going to cover the details of the curriculum frameworks for ABE Math, just so you know what has changed, what are the guiding principles of all of those changes, and why are we changing them. And then we're also going to present to you the new look of the revised mathematics standards matrix and dive into its uses and how you can be using them for your classroom instruction. And last but not the least, we're going to cover and look at what are the revised activity resources that make up the suite. Okay. So first and foremost, I wanted to cover the changes to the curriculum frameworks. And as you already know, this is prompted by the executive order from our governor outlining the pathway to making Florida the top 10 economy in the world by 2020. And as part of that initiative, one that has to be changed is the way we establish a pipeline to the workforce. And as a result of those initiatives, they started with the Florida K-12 best standards, and now it's time for us to update our adult education standards to match the changes in the Florida best, and also really tailor those standards so that it's workforce focused. The new adult education standards have revised organization and terminology. So if you are in tune with the previous standards or the previous curriculum frameworks, you're going to notice those changes. So the terminology and the organization is slightly different. Sometimes we call them a certain particular word, and now it's going to be called a different word. And one of those words is what we call strands. And I'm going to be able to really show you what this means as we go into deep to the changes. Now, some of the standards in the K-12 have been combined, and the same is reflected in our adult education standards. So there are standards where we saw there are equivalent or very similar or overlapping. Some of those standards have been combined, and the goal is to ensure that you are not covering it too much or doubling up on a particular standards that is not necessary. There's also some changes on the levels on the K-12. But if it's a different level on our side, the content standard was kept at the same level as with the previous framework to allow for consistency, because those were structured based on instruction and assessments that we are aligned to, such as CASAS, goals, TABE, and GED. So the new curriculum frameworks is now available to be downloaded from the Florida Department of Education website. As you can see, this is a snapshot of that page, and you can scroll through the adult basic education and go through mathematics and download your own copy of the curriculum frameworks. These frameworks are effective this current year, 23-24. So let's look at the mathematics framework and see what has changed. So in terms of the naming of the actual framework, there has been some changes and combinations in the RLA side, but on the mathematics, there are none. So mathematics is still called mathematics. There's no change in the title. However, our former applied academics for adult education, or AAAE, is now being replaced by academic skills building for mathematics. So what's new in math? So now we have a component in the standards that talks about mathematical habits of mind, things that you don't typically teach in your classrooms, not part of what's written in your textbooks. It's not typically assessed directly on standardized assessments, but nonetheless, they're very important because they're very important in developing alongside their understanding of the content. And those mathematical thinking and reasoning skills are placed at the forefront of the frameworks to emphasize to the teacher how important these standards are, even though they are not directly assessed. Based on research, these mathematical thinking and reasoning standards contribute directly to a student's understanding of the content standards in mathematics. So it helps with students' persistence, it helps with students' problem-solving skills, and all of the other necessary skills in math that students need to be able to master in order to increase from one level to another. Another thing that is new in math is that fluency is now being advanced earlier into the NRS levels. So students are now expected to demonstrate fluency at an earlier stage than before. So all the more pressure on the teacher side to focus on fluency and allowing our students to become quick in their math, allowing for them to do some mental math early on, allowing them to do critical shortcuts that they need to do to demonstrate that fluency early at an earlier stage. Overall, there have been fewer strands. I'm sorry. There are fewer strands because I'm going to show you how the strands have been combined or consolidated. So before we go there, I just wanted to show you the mathematical thinking and reasoning standards that I mentioned earlier. Again, these are standards that are not directly assessed by standardized assessment. It is not explicitly stated as a content standard. These are habits of mind. If you look carefully, fluency is very at the middle of this group of standards. Fluency, that's something that it is not explicitly stated as an objective in a lot of your materials that you use in class, but it has to remind the teacher that students have to be fast and quick when they're performing various mathematical operations, representing problems in multiple ways. You know, sometimes the textbooks or the instructional materials that you use doesn't necessarily do that all the time. So this is another, again, reminder to the teacher saying that there's more than one way to represent or solve a particular problem. And I'm going to pick another one, is assessing the reasonableness of solutions. So again, this is another example of a standard where students, it's not explicitly stated on the book that they have to be able to do that, but it's just a great habit of mind when students have finished solving a particular math word problem or a real world problem, that they double check whether their answers are reasonable. You know, if you're coming up with inches and you're expecting uh, a measurement in miles, then that's a really big question and should prompt the student to go back and review their solution before moving on to the next problem. So again, these are just basic habits of mind. They're just good. I look at them and as really good test taking strategies. However, based on research, these are standards that directly relate to students' performance in mathematics, even though they are not explicitly stated in a lot of mathematical instructional materials you use today. So here's what I'm talking about when I mentioned earlier that there has been some consolidations, okay? Previously, we call these strands as domains. So we are no longer using the word domains in our revised or new ABE standards for mathematics. So the 10 domains that we are used to in the past are now narrowed down because we have combined base 10 and number system domains into one singular strand, which is number sense and operations, because they really truly belong together. The number base 10 numbers is part of the number system. So it just makes sense to keep them all together. I didn't understand why it was separated to begin with. So now it's where it needs to be. Fractions is on its own, as we all know. Nothing has changed there. However, all of the algebraic reasoning strands or algebraic reasoning domains have been combined into one singular strand, which is called the algebraic reasoning. So when you're performing algebraic operation, or you are representing a particular word problem into symbolic expressions or equations, or where you're working with equations, solving equations, or isolating a particular variable, and also when you're solving proportional relationships, those are all algebraic processes. So therefore, we didn't see the relevance of breaking these into multiple strands. So we combined them all into one to make it all fit together and fit seamlessly in how you instruct your students, that these are no different than what you already do with algebraic thinking. So what you're doing with proportional relationships is the same set of rules that you perform with equations and algebraic operations. Now, functions, measurement, there's slight change in the wording of measurement. So instead of measurement and data, we're now just calling it measurement. Geometry is more than just the study of shapes and solids. Okay, so we envision geometry as more than that, proving whether a particular theorem is accurate, or performing various transformations on a particular geometric figure. Those types of processes require require reasoning in the process. So we thought that reasoning is such an important vocabulary to be included and be added into that to this strand, so that it encompasses everything that we expect student to do and be able to master at each NRS level. And then last but not the least, statistics and probability is now replaced by data and probability, or DP. So as you can see, all of these acronyms at the end, that will be your guide as to what type of strand you're teaching if you're just simply looking at the standards coding. All right, so what had prompted the changes? So as these standards are being revised, these are at the forefront of every person developing and putting together these new standards. First of all, using math in the real world. So how can we apply the mathematics skills that they learn in an adult education classroom to solve real-world problems in their daily lives or in the workplace. We also wanted to consider the different connections between the standards across the levels. So we want to make sure that there is a seamless transition and progression of skills from NRS level 1 all the way to NRS level 6. Last but not the least, we want to make sure that as students go and progress across the levels, that they are solidifying their conceptual understanding as well as their procedural fluency along the way. And just like I mentioned earlier, procedural fluency has been advanced earlier in the levels than previous. So if you want to take a look at which strands are being covered at the various levels of NRS at the ABE program level, so at an NRS level 1, you're going to look at the first column right after the strand name, and everything that is colored in orange are the strands that you're covering at that level. So as you can see, you don't need to cover, or you don't have to cover fractions at the level 1 NRS. Your students are not ready to absorb that particular type of information. Only when you get and advance the students at the level 2 NRS, when that fractions strand is highlighted in orange, that's when it's appropriate time, and that's when you actually see those fraction standards appear on the curriculum frameworks. And then when continuing on down on NRS level 1, there are algebraic reasoning, measurement, geometric reasoning, and some data and probability standards are included in there. As you can see, functions are not covered all until students are at the NRS level 4. Now, covering everything else is that if you look at the NRS level 4, well, before I go in there, NRS level 2 and 3 covers the same set of strands. As you can see here, it's the same all throughout across these two columns. And then when you go into level 4, that's when you fade away fractions and also measurement in order for you to be able to focus on a new strand that you're going to hit hard at level 4, which is functions. All right, so that's pretty much the new standards. What I wanted to talk about is what have we done at Florida IPDAE to support your implementation of the standards, okay? So I just wanted to show you that here at Florida IPDAE, we've developed 3 instructional matrices for you to use on a daily basis. So we have developed a mathematics standards matrix, the RLA standards matrix or reading language arts matrix, and the ESOL matrices. So these 3 matrices should make up or makes up our Florida IPDAE instructional suite. And they provide, we should be able to provide you with a more concise, big picture look of what needs to be covered at the various levels of NRS that you're teaching. So the new standards, the new mathematics standards matrix summarizes 24 pages of the curriculum framework. So who has time to read 24 pages? Okay. I don't know about you, but I don't. We want you to be able to be your very best at what you do, which is teach. So if you're sitting at home or not planning your lesson, but rather just reading these standards and understanding them, then that's no use. So we have summarized all 24 pages, all the 4 levels, the 7 thinking and reasoning standards, all of the 7 strands you have to cover, all 71 content standards included in this, and over 213 benchmarks that you have to cover for an entire year's worth of work in ABE. So what we did is combine all of this together into a singular page. We know you can read 1 page. So just a reminder again, we have 3 of these for every different subject area that you teach. For some of you that teach multiple subject areas, here you go. You have all of these available to you. We're going to focus on the math for today. if you have missed, and if you're an RLA teacher or you're an all around subject area teacher and you missed our RLA webinar, please go to the IPDAE website and go into our webinar archive so you can view and take a peek at the RLA and RLA matrix webinar, where I go over in full depth how to use and what are included in those. I'm going to pause right here and take a look at some of the comments. Well, great. Thank you so much. If you like these materials, please share it in the chat. If you are envisioning using, and however you feel about these materials and resources that we're developing here at Florida IPDAE, please let us know into the chat, because that's just giving us a lot of fuel to continue making more stuff for you. We hear you, teachers. We hear what you do every day. We understand that a lot of us do not get a lot of planning time. Most teachers in adult ed are part-time teachers. So who has the time to put this all together, right? So we at Florida IPDAE are thinking about you every single day, and we're putting together some very useful materials to make your lives easier, because we want your time used wisely. And that wisely, we refer to teaching students and teaching to these standards. All right, so moving on, we wanted to cover and take a look at some of these at the math matrix in particular. So if you notice, if you go down a vertical column, you're going to see all of the standards that are supposed to be, that are expected of to be mastered at that level. So you know how to progress your students vertically within your level. How do I make my student earn measurable skills gain or demonstrate a functioning level gain when they post-test in my class? So what you're going to notice is the grouping of these standards are very particular to align with NRS assessments or our standardized assessment, whether you're using TABE 11-12 or CASA schools. So if you're sticking to the standards, you are automatically hitting the major points in those two assessments. Now, we also wanted you to take a look at the horizontal progression of these standards. So what you're going to see is how you're able to elevate the scale from level to level. So you're still working on the same set of skills, but how do they differ from one level to another? So you know when to move when your students have reached mastery level and they're ready to move on to the next. So let's take, for example, this algebraic reasoning. At the initial levels, they only need to be able to solve addition problems between 0 and 20. And including subtraction, of course. So solve addition and subtraction problems between 0 and 20. And then as you move on to NRS level 2, that increases from addition and subtraction problems between 0 and 100. Now, as you move them forward, now it will involve not just addition and subtraction. At the NRS level 3, their students are expected to be able to solve with all 4 operations with any whole numbers and fractions. So this already starts including the different types of numbers or rational numbers such as fractions. And at the highest level of NRS is to now not only just solve problems using the 4 different operations for any set of whole numbers or fractions, but also apply them into the setting of arithmetic expressions and algebraic expressions. So be able to now see how those operations with rational numbers are play into in an expression or in an algebraic expression. So you can see now how what's the cutoff for each level, but you also can see what you're building towards. Or if you're teaching, let's say, at NRS level 3, using the matrix, that will show you that'll give you an idea of what students should already have mastered by the time they get to you. And then that will prompt you to me if they have not fully demonstrated mastery, that you might want to start reviewing the previous level first before moving on and tackling the standards at your level. So I just covered the vertical and horizontal progression of cells or items in there. What you're also going to notice is that the wording is abridged. So meaning we made the standards and stated the standards in more concise language in order to fit them into a single page. So what you're going to notice is that they're not the exact wording that you will see in the curriculum frameworks. However, it captures the entire essence of that standard, and so that we can make it fit into this beautiful singular page spread of the matrix. Now, let's talk about some of the things that how would you use the matrix. Just like in previous years, we've talked about and showed you how you can use the matrix in various different applications. And these are just some instructional considerations for the math matrix. So this is really, like I mentioned earlier, identifying prior knowledge that students must have already mastered at the previous level, connecting those to your level, okay, and not only to the NRS level, but you can disaggregate them by strand. You can use this as a checklist of topics that you've covered over time. You can use it for scaffolding. If students are struggling with a particular standard, you can zoom in into that standard and look back and identify whether the foundational standards are impacting the students' understanding of a particular standard. So, which is usually the case. This will also allow you to chunk standards together, be able to make best use of your time, so you're hitting multiple standards at the same time. If you're like me, you teach multiple levels in a particular class, the matrix is going to allow you to group students together based on specific subject matter deficiencies that they have, based on their post-test or based on their practice test that you do in class. It also allows you to anticipate any struggle points that they may have or you might encounter. This is really going to help you guys to close the achievement gap between students in your class, especially if you have a class with multiple levels of students, and it's a large learning curve. This will allow you to plan interventions, meaning you can mark particular standards that you want to spend more time on. It's a good reminder for you to take a look at over time and remind yourself, hey, stop. This is a very tricky strand. This particular standard is usually a struggling point for students, or a mostly missed type of standard for students. That's going to allow you now to really prepare for that, because you can now see everything in one big picture. And just like differentiating, student grouping is also another use for this matrix. Let me just show you what I've got here. So in terms of planning, I would take the matrix, print it out for myself, and I would like mark which week will I cover each particular standard. Maybe put in the pages of my book that I use, or put in the resources that I use for a particular standard. So this is now the perfect way for you to transition from the old standards to the new standards. So looking at this, you can see I've marked the weeks. So then if there are any unanticipated changes, I can make the change and cascade the change, and also let that affect the entire matrix. So I can say, okay, wait, I'm running out of time with my students. I'm not going to be able to cover enough. So now that you're seeing it as a big picture, it has how many weeks you're going to need to teach all of the standards for a particular level. Now you can forecast that and make some necessary changes or planning. Here's an example for scaffolding, differentiation, and grouping. Now, what I would suggest you do is provide a copy of this of the matrix to each student in your class, and they mark through, or you mark with them, all of the different areas where they feel they're struggling with, or they want more instruction on. Everything that's green is something that they've already mastered, and everything that's red is something that they need more reinforcement. So you as a teacher, you already know, okay, which topics, which skills should I need to focus on in order to help my students to become more successful. Here's another one. I've seen other teachers use the previous matrices as a progression chart, and this is how you would want to use the matrix as a progression chart. Is as you cover or as students demonstrate mastery in a particular standard, they color that cell green, and over time the students feel, hey, I feel like I'm accomplishing something, because when I started off, this whole map was gray or white. So now, it's going to continually motivate the student to strive harder, come to class every day, because they feel and they see that they're making progress over time. So having that visual for the student helps the student kind of quantify how much you're making a difference with them in the classroom. So this has been a really good one. You might want to create one for your class, like blow up a big copy of the matrix, post it on the wall, and as your class covers multiple areas, you mark those areas in green so the class can see, okay, what have we covered? What are we covering next? And what do I need to master prior to my post test so I can show gains? Another use of the matrix, just like a checklist. So this is something that might be provided to the student at the beginning of the school as they're coming into class during orientation. Welcome to our adult education program. Welcome to ABE math, to this ABE math course, excuse me, and say, okay, so as part of our adult education program, we wanted to show you how rigorous our program is. If you want to get an idea of what and how much you're going to learn in this subject matter, here's the listing of all of those standards that you're going to demonstrate mastery. So it's not a big surprise for the student. What are things that they're going to be learning over time? It also eliminates the nonstop asking of questions like, why do we have to learn this? Why do we have to learn fractions, especially if with fraction? They keep asking that question. So this is really a good way to show them, hey, you're really going to cover fraction because you're at NRS level 2 and 3. Fractions are at the core of these two NRS levels, and you should be able to demonstrate mastery with them in order to be successful and get to level 4. I'm going to pause right here and look at some of the comments or feedback that you may have. Thank you so much for mentioning how convenient the matrices are. If you have instructors that teach similar subject areas or teach math or RLA or ESOL, turn them over to this webinar. Have them go to the IPDAE website, look at the webinar archives for ABE. That's where they're going to see, the archived webinar, the recorded webinar of all these matrices, so they will understand how to access these matrices. All it takes is just send them the link. You can also download copies, and that's something that I want to cover next, because I know you're interested on how do you do that. So let me just summarize real quick the benefits for you as a teacher. So as a math teacher, you now have a more visual representation of the standards. You don't have to keep flipping to multiple pages over time. It'll make your correlations a little bit quicker. It'll give you like the big picture of what you need to cover. No surprises. And so it also allows you to see and plan the logical grouping of topics across levels. So if you teach a multi-level class, you know how to group those topics together. So you're not all over the place. You're not using a level 1 book and then a level 2 book and then a level 3 book all at the same time. Now that you have all the matrices together, you just need to look at one book and look at the matrices and see how far you're going to go at that scale. It also emphasizes how they are related to one another, so which standards are foundational to a particular standard, and so it allows you to diagnose where students are struggling with. It also organizes your ABE levels for you, okay, according to conceptual categories and strands, so it's easier to locate a particular strand if you forgot about it. And then it just itemizes to you the level and the quantity of content and objectives that you need to cover over time so that the students are successful in your class. Now, for the students, it serves as their quick guide, a quick reference. They're able to prioritize and even mark those areas that your students know, okay, I'm not good at this. I need my teacher to provide me more examples. So it's really providing you and your student a direct path of communication to talk about which standards they feel they're weak at, because they're the ones taking the tests, and they can't necessarily tell you what specific item on the test they missed, but just using the matrix to communicate to you, okay, where do you think you struggled with the most, coming out of a post test? And then that'll allow you as a teacher now to cater the instruction or tailor your instruction to meet those gaps. And for the student, it's just no surprises held for the students. Everything that is tested in the tape or CASAs is already in here. And so they know if they want to study ahead, because it's going to happen. Sometimes they're going to run out of time, they're going to have to move, or it's time for them to take the GED test. It allows them to see, okay, what things do I already have to have mastered so that I can ensure the best possible outcome for this test. So really allows the student to take a look, reflect on their performance, and communicate with a teacher if they need help. So we develop the matrix not just for you teachers, but we also develop them with your students in mind. So feel free to make copies of the standards and give them to your students. And if you're not satisfied with everything that I just explained before, we are adding more. And now we're going to cover the activity resources. So let's say you are a part-time math teacher. You teach at the K-12 all day for 8 hours, and then you're coming at night, maybe at 6 p.m. at night, and you're teaching ABE math, right? So very, very limited. You have very, very limited planning time, if that. Most of that planning time would be consumed by filling out paperwork. Now, when you come in and jump in and start teaching your class, you can't just go by the book, because you never know. The book, they change very slowly. Okay, so you never know when your book is still aligned to your standards. Okay, and how your book's content really address the competencies that are assessed in the standardized tests. So you go in here and you look at the matrix and say, okay, I'm supposed to teach this standard. Where do I start? Well, we just eliminated all of the thinking process from you guys, so you guys can just focus on, okay, this is what this standards talks about. So now I can focus on coming up with different examples and looking at the section of the book that reinforces this particular standard. So we have what we call this activity resource that we develop for you for each and every cell of the matrix. So if you're looking at the matrix and you're looking at a particular cell, and just in case, in this particular case, I'm looking at MAL2FR.2. That's a ordering and comparing fractions type of standard. If you look for that in the matrix, in the electronic matrix, it will populate an activity resource ready for you to use. So that's what I'm going to do and demonstrate right now to you, is to how to access this activity resource. And then once I access the activity resource, we're gonna take a peek to what are the different things that are included in there, because you're gonna be surprised. There's a lot of content included in those activity resources. So just like before you you go into the Florida IPDAE website, www.floridaipdae.org, and once this landing page, beautiful landing page, pops up, you can scroll all the way to the top where you see AE Toolbox, and it's boxed in orange on my slide. And once you click on that, it'll take you to this page, the AE curriculum matrix, or the electronic matrix. Now, as I said earlier, you can download the matrix, the full matrix, directly from the IPDAE website. So there are two versions that you can download. The first one is a letter size. That letter size is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So it's customized to fit a single page of paper, of printer paper, for your convenience, if you want to make copies, several copies for yourself or for your students. Now, we also included another version if you want a blow-up copy of the matrix without pixelating. We created a downloadable poster size of matrix. So this second link where it says poster or download poster, you can save that into your thumb drive, take it to your local US UPS store or FedEx or Staples, and you can have them print a poster size matrix. Now, some schools might have poster printers. So if you're using a poster printer and you're blowing up the matrix and you don't want it to become pixelated, you must use this poster version of the matrix. Now, going back to the activity resource, I'm going to show you and really demonstrate to you how you download and open up activity resources. So I'm going to exit my PowerPoint and jump into the Florida IPDAE website. So let's just scroll back and let's just go home here. So if you're looking at the Florida IPDAE website, www.floridaipdae.org, this is the section you want to go. And when you hover on top of AE Toolbox, it's going to give you 3 options. And you're going to select the first option. That's the matrix option. Once you click on that, it will land you to this page. Again, like I showed you earlier, these are the 2 links to where you can download the various versions of the matrices for math. And then now we're going to use the middle section to download a copy of an activity resource. So in order to download an activity resource, you first must select what subject area you want to download. So now, before last year, we only have reading, language arts, and math. Now we have 3 subject areas. We even have ESOL, electronic curriculum matrices here. So I'm going to go into mathematics because that's our focus for today. Now, after you've selected the subject area, you're now going to select the level. Let's take level 2. And then from level 2, you're now going to select the strand that you wanted to address, or where those activity resources are located. And I'm sure you're going to select fractions. Now we have one activity resource for fractions, and this is in particular the skill for ordering and comparing fractions and looking for equivalent fractions. So now I have downloaded a copy of the activity resource on fractions, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can clearly see what we're talking about here. Okay, so this is good enough. As you can see, the first section of the activity resource, you're going to see key terms, key vocabulary words that you need to cover, which is very important for reading skills for our student. It recaps all the benchmarks that this activity resource is covering, including the applications of these standards to real life. Now, in this page, you're going to see the vertical alignment, the before and after scale. So just so you know, just so if you have just a copy of the activity resource, but you don't have your matrix with you because you are reading it at home, you have a snippet of the matrix to take a look at, so you know, and you can estimate the vertical alignment of the skill. And then the next page talks about the horizontal alignment. Okay, what are the other interrelated skills to the skills that are included here or are developed in this particular activity resource? This is what I love the most. It has contextualized examples for all of you that are IET instructors. So if you're an IET teacher and you happen to be in one of these fields, we've provided you with some contextualized or ideas for contextualization for this particular topic. So we selected the ones where fractions is really crucial, like in the field of healthcare, in the field of HVAC, and also construction and logistics. And it itemizes all of those applications for you. The next is examples of misconceptions that students might already have pertaining to this particular skill, so that you as a teacher know ahead of time, okay, these are a common misconception. We need to demystify this idea and before moving into developing the concept. And now you have the concept itself. It breaks it down to equivalent fractions and really builds the conceptual understanding of different operations and comparing fractions and also equivalent fractions. Continuing on for misconceptions here. And then what it does is, what we're also providing you is not just what misconceptions students may have, but also ideas for developing and addressing that particular misconception. So we're not only giving you the ideas, we're also showing you how to address them. And then here are some fabulous links where you can download or go to particular resources that develop these particular skills, focusing strictly on comparing and evaluating fractions and equivalent fractions, right? So when you click on these links, it will directly lead you to website, games, interactive pages, manipulatives online that develop the skill of equivalent fractions and comparing fractions. And then also, again, continuing on, building upon that misconception again, and what are the different ideas for developing that student understanding to address those misconceptions. Different tasks for lesson planning. So if you're already planning lesson, this could be it, you know? So you can just take the link, include it into your notes. It has every single thing that a teacher needs in order to effectively plan lessons and activities to develop this particular standard. And then last but not the least is there are some appendices. So if you are a multi-level teacher, it will show you some ideas for how to differentiate your instruction. And if you're an IET teacher, it will give you some ideas on how to contextualize instruction on various careers. It also has some ideas on how to contextualize instruction based on the various strengths and weaknesses of your students. So all of those are already spelled out here for you. All you got to do is read and implement. So that's pretty much the full walkthrough to one of the activity resources we have for you. All of the activity resources, what you're going to notice, have the same format and have the same flow to their content. So so that wherever you are, you can see, okay, this is what's next, this is what's coming. And this is not just for teachers, this is also for students, because this is available through the World Wide Web. So for example, you have a student that's been out and missed so many lessons, and this is one of the lessons that they missed. Send them the link, have them go straight directly to this activity resource and start looking at and exploring the links, looking at the vocabulary they need to learn, and then reading about the certain misconceptions students might have and ideas for addressing those misconceptions. So really could serve many, many different purposes. I want to know what you guys think about the activity resources, the matrices. How else are you envisioning the use of these materials? So I'm going to pause right here and wait for you guys to share your feedback. I would like to know, as one of the people that are looking here at the, as one of the people that are promoting these materials and really using this on a daily basis, I want to know and want to get some ideas from you guys. How do you envision yourself using these materials? Now I'm going to turn back into my PowerPoint presentation. Again, keep those feedback coming into the chat and I will address them as we go. But at this point, I want to turn it over to Junrol to start closing us out.
Ron, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with us today, going over the math matrices. I know that people are able to use this in a very precise way and an easy way. So thank you so much, Ron. We really appreciate your efforts and appreciate you as one of our lead trainers. So now you're going to see appearing on your screen a feedback questionnaire. If you could take 60 seconds and just answer these questions, we so appreciate your feedback and would love for you to take this survey. While you do that, I want to remind you that next Wednesday, our webinar will be about new administrators. For new administrators, it's the new administrator course orientation. This is a virtual course that will take practitioners that are new to adult education or that just need some more clarity on modules about an overview of adult education assessment, accountability and performance measures, grant administration, and lots more. So I hope that you will join us next Wednesday for our webinar, New Administrator Course Orientation. So for that concludes our time together today. I wish all of you a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope to see all of you next week on our webinar. Thank you.